The chair was broken, it's fine, I'm sorry.
I'm not going to fall out of it, am I?
No, just reload and
It's
load.
now 6 o'clock, and we will begin our workshop. Our first item on our agenda is discuss the regular agenda items and consent agenda. I'll go through the items if anyone has any questions or wants to pull anything. We have our invocation by Councilwoman Kay. I will fill in for Mayor Gilmore for the pledges to flags, proclamation, public hearing number 1. Any questions? Consent agenda. Item 2, 3, item 4, item 5, item 6, item 7, item 8, item 9, item 10, item 11, item 12.
How many more do we think we have with our,
I had the exact same question.
with our PMX?
Oh, with our PMX, I think we're, well, David stopped saying that this is the last one, but we're pretty close to completion.
Yeah, they're pretty close. Turn lane is this 121, so I think we'll have to see what happens there, but otherwise everything else is done.
Item 13.
Sorry, can you explain the quick claim deed a little bit, how this, I guess how this came to be?
So, David, you want to talk about the history of how they ended up building over top of the easement?
Oh, okay. Of course, this is the old Cowan Avenue right-of-way, and back in the 1990s, 80s, and 90s, half, Valley Ridge, of course, was extended, and then Cowan Avenue was curved to intersect with Mill Street, so that left a 60-foot right-of-way of the street, and then kind of in that little triangle area. So what happened was, is at that time, half of the Cowan Avenue right-of-way was quitclaim, which left 30 feet along the west side of that little triangular property. At some point in the 90s, somebody built a strip center there and inadvertently built a building on top of that 30-foot easement. And it wasn't the entire 30 feet. You can look at your exhibits. It's it basically it's a narrow wedge. I think it's like maybe 7 feet wide at the widest point, and it tapers down to nothing. So what's happened, of course, now is the northern part of that building is for sale or being sold, and the new owners, of course, didn't want to close on it because there's a condition that was approved by the city council back in the 90s that basically said that you can have your building there, but if the city comes in and tells you you need to have that space in the easement, you have to remove the building within 30 days. Well, obviously they didn't want to build or buy the building with that clause, so we're proposing to quitclaim the small yellow wedge that you see on your exhibit in the backyard.
And it's quitclaim rather than any type of warranty because we didn't have anything that we took it with warranty, so we can't give them anything. We don't want to say we have certain rights we don't know we have, so we're just quitclaiming.
And we have really no potential use for that anyway.
Item 14. Item 15. Item 16. Regular hearings. Item 17. Item 18. Item 19. Item 20. We should have a closed session tonight, and the mayor should be here by then. We'll go to our staff, and we'll go to our item B, discussion and implementation of a public facility corporation. Mayor Shea.
Thank you. So at City Council retreat earlier this year,
city staff from the Department of Neighborhood Services, as well as our affordable housing consultant, briefed the council on various affordable housing tools that the city could utilize. From there, City Council actually voted on priorities for the city staff to focus on in the coming year, and that also included affordable housing. So I'm here today to brief you on public facility corporations, as well as how they will help us in the development and redevelopment of affordable housing in the city, and talk about next steps as well. So I also want to mention that although our consultant couldn't be here with us today, he did help me put together this presentation and all this information for you here today. And then lastly, I will also mention that this presentation may slightly vary from the one that you have in front of you that was posted. There were just been some minor changes to it. So first, I'm just going to do a quick overview. So PFCs are authorized by Chapter 303 of the Texas Local Government Code. It authorizes a sponsor, such as the municipality or one of the other entities listed here, to construct, acquire, rehabilitate, etc., and place into service public facilities. The definition of public facilities is here, but you can see that affordable housing is deemed to be a public facility. And the governance of that is, of the PFC, is a board of directors composed of at least 3 individuals that are appointed by the sponsor's governing body. So again, the creation of PFC would facilitate the city's involvement in the creation of affordable housing. And a few things I wanted to note about that is the PFC is authorized by statute to issue private activity bonds. And a few things I want to note about that is that these bonds have no financial risk to the city or to the PFC. The bonds have no effect on the city's bond rating. The PFC would also receive revenue from that through an issuer's fee, and the bonds are non-recourse against the PFC. So there's very little risk in it. The PFC involvement in affordable housing development will make the property eligible for a property tax exemption, and that's what's made it widely popular in the development community. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be revenues coming back to the PFC, which will create another source of funding to the city, which could be used for any public purpose. So the PFC, and I'll get into this a little bit more at the end of the presentation, is would be a part of a limited partnership for each project. It would be created for the purpose of developing and managing the project. The statute requires that at least 50% of the residential units be set aside for incomes at or below 80% of the AMI. The affordability as well as the revenue, those are all negotiated on a case-by-case basis. There isn't a specific amount of years in the statute that says, you know, it has to be a certain amount of years for affordability. So I'll talk quickly about 3 different types of financing scenarios with PFCs. One includes low-income housing credits awards of 9%, LIHTC awards of 4%, and then strictly a PFC model, meaning that in that third option, there are no tax credits that are layered on top of that. It's just straight a PFC deal, which has less restrictions because, as I mentioned, the statute is it's very broad, and you have a lot of flexibility. A lot of flexibility there. So this has come up a lot because depending on who you talk to, it's affordable housing, workforce housing. No one uses the term exactly the same. They're been used interchangeably, and at times there are those that have said, you know, workforce housing to me means this, which is affordable, safe, comfortable living spaces for the working class. And then also, there's typically an AMI range, 60 to 100% of the AMI. But in some cases, I've also seen it also include below 60% of the AMI, which makes sense to me because workforce housing means affordable housing for the entirety of your workforce, not just for any one subset of, you know, individual people. It's the whole working class. And then affordable housing is typically considered between 0 to 60% of the AMI. And then again, depending on the source or who you ask, it may go up to 80%. So I say all that to say there's no consistency. Whatever we want to call it, we will call it that. And I think the real purpose of this is to create affordable housing for all of our residents, no matter what AMI level you're at.
Mary Michelle, I've got a question. Is there a time frame or an expiration, or is these credits and exemptions and everything perpetuity?
Not perpetuity. I will actually get to,
Okay.
if it's a LIHTC transaction, I'll get to that here in just a minute, the different periods for compliance. And if it's not coupled with tax credits, then there's no set required level of affordability. It's when it comes to the amount of years. So that's all going to be negotiated. Only thing the statute requires is that it's 80% or below of the AMI. So I'm going to touch briefly on tax credits, because I'm sure you all are familiar already with them. So low-income housing tax credits, which I refer to as LIHTC, was created by Section 42 of the IRS Code, and the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, which is TDHCA, is the only entity in Texas authorized to allocate credits under the program. Tax credits are awarded to eligible participants to offset a portion of the federal tax liability in exchange for production or preservation of affordable housing. And again, there are two types. There are 9% and 4%, which I will actually briefly go over. So 9% are highly competitive. They are only accepted once a year, so they're due in January and the awards happen in July. It does create a great amount of equity in the deal, so it covers 50 to 60% of the development's hard cost. And then you'll see here the income rent restrictions are at least 30 years, and the AMI, it cannot exceed 60% of the AMI. So 4% tax credits are always coupled with private activity bonds, which could be issued by the PFC or it could be issued by another entity such as TDHCA or Housing Finance Corporation. 4% have been deemed to be non-competitive in the past, but more recently it's been in high demand. So it has been more competitive these days than it used to be. The equity provided here is equal to approximately 30% of the development's hard costs, which you can see the difference between the 9% and the 4%. Obviously the 9% provides more equity in the deal. The income restrictions are the same, at least 30 years, and same as the AMI as well, not in excess of 60% of the AMI. So here's the breakdown of the compliance period and the restriction period for LIHTC deals. So the credit period is 10 years, and that is the period where the investor receives a tax credit. And the tax credits are dollar for dollar taxes owed by the taxpayer who is the investor. The compliance period is the time in which the IRS requires the investor to provide the affordable housing. And the restriction period is 30 plus years, and that is the time period that TDHCA may restrict income levels or rent levels for a residential unit. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Michelle, do you remember what type of LIHTC it was for the Bethel Baptist, that project? I forgot the name of that.
9%.
9%. So the senior project you just saw was the 9%.
Okay, what is Evergreen, the one that we've been having some talks on? Where does that fall out? Aren't they at the end of that period?
So they are still, I think, Chris McGann, didn't you guys do research that and find out where they are?
80% AMI.
How close are they to the end of the time period, though? Or are they at it? Is that why they're...
I believe they're coming close to the end of their
Yeah, I don't
time
think
period.
it's actually run out yet. So what we're
Correct.
looking at, they're still, so when they're saying that they're changing their rent on them, I think what's happening is that the average median income is changing in the Metroplex, but they're still required by law to have that I thought it was 60% AMI, was it 80%?
I think it was 80.
80%, okay. Okay, so I don't think there's been nothing with regard to the affordability changing, like that the taxes today, tax credits have gone away. So they're still there, the restrictions are still on them. But again, that 60% AMI depends on what the AMI is, and it changes every year, and HUD comes out with that number.
Thank you.
So I'm going to talk briefly about the ways that both PFC model projects are typical transaction in business terms, as well as low-income housing tax credit projects. So in the PFC model, again, as I mentioned, the affordability is negotiated as well as the years of affordability. And the revenue is also negotiated. So you see that there's a acquisition fee, an annual revenue, and then proceeds in the event of a sale or refinance. So in parentheses, you will see what we've determined is pretty much the standard, but it's all negotiated on a case-by-case basis. Tax credit model, you'll see here in parentheses again the percentage of the developer fee, the net cash flow, and the net proceeds for a sale or refinance of the project. So in both instances, there will be revenue that is generated. This is just a broad overview of what potentially could be the revenue in the first 2 years versus annually, and if there is a sale or refinance of a property. And then I also just wanted to mention that the use of the funds are unrestricted, so it just has to be used for a public purpose. So new construction versus acquisition rehab. I think for the most part, we would definitely want to enhance the housing stock that we currently have, especially already being over 50% multifamily. So I think that would be our focus, and I think that has been the direction from the council in the past. New construction, there may be times where new construction may make sense. It may depend on the location, or it may depend on the project, or so what we're thinking is that on a case-by-case basis, we would look at it, because the developer's going to come to us. They're going to tell us whether or not they want to do rehab or whether or not they want to do new construction. And then we will negotiate with them to determine whether or not we believe new construction would be best, or if we want to pass on it and say, no, we're interested in rehab.
One of the things that's interesting in there is, we're not really saying widely, put multifamily anywhere new in Louisville. We've really said multifamily needs to be in these key transit-oriented development areas, and we're okay with those, right? So the interesting thing is most of those places tend to be where tax increment financing districts are also layered on top. So if you created a public facility corporation, you would take it off the rolls altogether. Well, that's money that you take away from your tax increment financing district. Which still, going back to what she says, there may be a desire still, when you have Old Town and everything is built up with high-end apartments, at the end of the day, is there room left for some affordability there? So you may want to look into those situations, and we'll want to get your feedback by the end of this. Is that something you want to look at? Obviously, it has to make business sense, but in the Northern Gateway as well, we've got a lot of residential that's going to go on there. Is that appropriate to have a mix of incomes in that area as well?
So we're still doing the housing study, right?
We are.
So I assume that feeds into this, right?
It will. So that was one of the things, it's a chicken versus an egg thing. So really, once you create a public facility corporation, we already have, once council said affordable housing was your interest, we have people knocking on our door. Like, I can't tell you, like, we field calls all the time. Now, whether it's meaningful affordable housing, some of them were like, that's not even meaningful enough. Like, we're not even gonna, but that's really what we're wanting to do here is, right now, we're just treading water and saying, hey, we don't really know if council's gonna be in agreement with this or not. We need to really touch base with them, and we need to create a PFC. So first thing is tools, you have to have a PFC. Once we create that public facility corporation, it's gonna make it even more, people will start coming to us even more. So that's the good news. But then I think the problem is the housing study is not done. To really know where we want to focus, it's hard to not have that if you want to make database decisions, right?
Right.
And so part of this is I mean, part of what council could tell us today is we don't even want to move forward with any affordable housing projects and even start negotiating until we get that housing study from Neighborhood Services done, which is okay. But the direction from council I had heard was we want to start moving forward. So kind of generally getting some swags from council as to where you want to see us focusing on. We can keep moving that direction, or you can tell us literally, okay, we'll create the Public Facility Corporation, but we don't want to do anything until we get the data from the housing study.
Well, I personally, forgive me, I don't remember how long it's gonna take to do the housing study. I think it was a long time,
It's
right? But I don't
actually-
know how long it takes to set up something like this either and kind of be ready to go.
We would be done, so we have all the documents, and you'll see this at the end. We will be ready to put it on your next agenda if you want to move forward, to create the Public Facility Corporation with the incorporation documents, and we send it off, and then it's created.
Okay.
Council would be the board, I would be the general manager, and operate just the same way as we have. The alternative is we could create the Public Facility Corporation, and then pause, and then your study's going to be done in January?
Yeah, so probably the beginning of the year, but we're selecting them through the RFP process in the next week.
Well, that's really not that bad. I mean,
It's not bad.
It's September, so it's not the year out.
Yeah. So, and that's fine if council wants that. That's really why we wanted to touch base with you, not only to inform you and educate you about how these work, because they're really complex, but also to see, is your appetite, you want to push forward aggressively now, or do you want to get the data from the housing study? And we can always adjust what we're looking for after we get the data. The difficulty is going to be if we're moving forward with a project now that might look good and people are ready to move, do you want to put the brakes on it before?
Yeah, well, and then it would just come into like, what is our capacity? And I don't know if maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but like, what's our capacity? How much can we handle? How many can we do?
Absolutely, and she's going to have a
That is the
slide on that.
question.
Excellent, all right.
And it depends. It depends on various factors, including some of the factors I have listed here: land availability, cost, the impact of lost tax revenues, and the city's capacity to oversee these transactions. So I don't think there's a magic number. As Claire said, I think we're just kind of gauging where we want to be and then kind of just steadily moving forward. And I'll cover this here close to the end. There may be some legislation coming in this next session that may affect the flexibility that we currently have in the statute. And that's also part of the reason why we want to go ahead and get it established. And as Claire mentioned, we don't necessarily have to move forward right now. We can wait, we can not, we can bring deals to the board and see how the board feels about it. But that's also something to consider because it may make it more difficult.
So are you saying that there's legislation that may restrict what we can do, or are you saying that, well, if we did this now, would we be grandfathered in?
No, just saying that we would get started on deals and bringing affordability to the city of Lewisville, although we're waiting on the study and we don't know exactly what the need is, and that's what the study will tell us. We know that we need affordable housing, and it's starting somewhere.
So one of the things that may change with the PFC is that there are certain set-asides that the state gives you for who are we going to focus on with giving those tax credits to. And so if you have a PFC, you're automatically given preferential treatment. And I think there's discussion about potentially taking that away. There's also discussion about that 80% AMI. When we look through that, it's not that big of a reduction, and you're giving a huge tax credit. You're taking it off the rolls, not just for city, but school district and county taxes. So at that point, you're looking at, okay, is just being 80% AMI really meaningful enough to give a full tax credit on that? And I think there are some cases where it is, and we'll talk through that, and most of them are not. So.
And we're here. So this was the next slide that we were going to discuss. So, and we've already started some of this. So this slide I really wanted to reserve to get the council's feedback on 5 of the main bullet points listed here, the AMI levels. So what we've noticed is that it obviously varies by project. I don't think there has been any type of cookie cutter situation where we would say that all deals look like this or like that, but here are a few examples. We do not see a whole lot of projects that have gone below 50% of the AMI, and that may be for various reasons. So when we've talked to developers and our consultants about it, the feedback has been it has to make financial sense for the developer. So typically, it may be a situation where the entity that is the PFC does not want to lose out on more revenue, because the deeper you go in the AMI, the less revenue that you're going to take in due to that, because it's going to affect cost. So we think that may be part of the issue of why we haven't seen that. Not to say that we can't pursue it, and we could bring options to you to show you what it would look like if the developer is willing to do 50% or 20% and see what that would look like revenue-wise, or if it even means that the city has to put money into it. So it's something that we can definitely explore. It's just not something that we've widely seen since.
We wanted to make sure you had that level of expectation, because I know when the seniors showed up and said they wanted affordable housing, and they're saying, we live at 20% AMI, you're just not seeing developers do that. So if you're wanting to do that, it would be the city using general fund dollars, putting all of our money into something to offset it from one project. So I just wanted you guys to have that level of expectation.
Is part of the housing studies that also get into, like, what is the cross-section of where our demographic is as far as the income? Where are we on that spectrum? What's the demand
Yes.
for the
I think
different
that's the
percentages?
exact purpose of the housing
Okay.
study, is to really, and not only that, we're also asking for a breakdown on rooms. So should we be focused on affordable housing that maybe are apartments with 3 bedrooms instead of 2 bedrooms? Is there a need in our community for families for affordable housing rather than individual, single, 1-bedroom homes? So,
And Claire, I was going to mention that Evergreen was 60%, so I stand corrected, sorry.
thank you.
Is this a newer deck than what we have?
Yes, yes.
I'm looking for that slide.
So-
Okay.
So what I did was I kind of used this slide to pull in some of the business terms that I really wanted to get feedback on from you all, but you've seen most of this on previous slides, the affordability, the expenditure of funds, et cetera. It was just kind of pulling it all together to get your feedback on each.
So if we did some project, I guess, to start off this thing and get, a normal kind of developer ratios, can those funds be used to maybe fund a development that's, closer to that 40, maybe try one out and then.
Absolutely. So we actually did that in the past with our HFC, so I don't remember the name of the project, but I don't think it was Verona. No, it was not Verona, that's up north. I can't remember the name, Toscana or something. So we did an affordable housing project where they had a percentage that was affordable, and then the HFC got money back. The city council at that time determined we were going to use the dollars we got back and use it towards single-family affordable housing. So what they did was provide more grants actually I think they did a home grant, used our own dollars from that to put more into single-family affordability. So it is completely unencumbered with restrictions. Once it comes back to you, we were hearing from other cities that they were using it to build a fire station. You can do whatever you want with it. I think a lot of cities are really reinvesting in, they're reinvesting in it for affordable housing purposes. So yes, you could do exactly what you're saying.
So just feedback on the area median income and where you may want to see us start. Again, it's going to be negotiated and the developer has to be able to agree to it. But any feedback on that?
Well, I guess I'll go first. When we're talking about 80%, again, I'm not quite sure, it seems like if it's that close, I don't know if that's really, I would rather focus on lower than 80%. It seems like what I'm hearing is either, there's 50, 60, or 80, it jumps to 80, right? So, I guess my preference would be on the higher end to focus around 60. I am interested in looking into the 30 just because that was the number that the seniors threw out, and I know that we have an aging population when I was in 2025 on one of the subcommittees, there was already an outcry for we need affordable housing for seniors, and that was a while ago. So I know we need more now. So I'd like to look at the lower
Standard
end.
achieve.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But I really want to hear what the housing study says our need is.
Well, and then what we can tell you is if we get a great project that lands in our lap, that's got all these, you know, this level, then we can always bring it to you. And then otherwise, we can just create the PFC and just, you know, sit on it until, I think you have to have one meeting to initiate it, but then we can just wait for the data.
I mean, we're only talking 4 months.
Right.
Okay. I mean, and the reality too is that we'll probably see some data before the report is published,
Right.
right? So
Oh, yeah.
we might have an idea.
True. The other thing that I wanted to make sure, and Marichelle, I think, was about to get to this. So I do think that there might be appropriateness for 80% AMI, minimum 8, or just doing that 80%, but only in situations where you have an existing multifamily or extended stay hotel that would be turned into affordable housing, and they would be using this to put a lot of money for rehab into the project.
Okay.
That would be the only exception for just that 80%.
I'm going to go ballistic if the city brings another extended stay hotel.
I could hear that.
Talking about existing extended stay hotels.
Naples.
The city doesn't bring those.
Well, you
They
know,
come to us.
I know,
So
but they've been approved.
anybody else have any input that they want to?
I mean, obviously, I think I'm the same way. I would like to see 60, but if getting 180 and we can pull off a 30, then
Yeah.
I think there's some benefit in that.
All right, and then quickly, again, I'll just go over the affordability period and rent restrictions. Again, there's no requirement in statute for either. So what's typical is about 15 years, but that's also negotiated. And some PFC deals does not have a cap on rent restrictions at all. So any cap on the monthly income limits. So, but we have seen some deals do cap it at 30 to 35% of the monthly income. So that's something we could also look at and try to negotiate.
And especially for a subset of seniors. I mean, it's not like they're going to get a raise. I mean, we know how that works. They might get $25 a year difference. But then if their rent goes up $400, they're stuck between prescriptions, eating, or paying rent. So I think there needs to be some, my personal opinion, there needs to be some restrictions on the seniors, the senior affordable.
I think we're starting from a place, this is like a totally new thing for us.
Yes.
So I think we need to be a little bit flexible in what our expectations are, because we need to see what we can work with developers to try to get the best deal that we can, and not lock in on we want this number. Like, this is where we're starting, where you at, so we can see what when the pencils are pushed that it adds up. They can make money, we can make sure that our seniors and our residents, and not just seniors, because we have some people who work for us who probably have some affordability housing issues as well. So I love it. I read through everything already, and I'm like, I know which pages are different now. So I mean, this is great. I mean, Congress is working on a bill right now talking about the low-income housing credit. Will it come through? I don't know, but that it will reduce the AMI to 50%, I think, from 60. So that may open up some more money. So I like where we're at. I don't think waiting for the housing study to come in. If a deal comes and we all like it, we can go with it, or we can wait. We don't have to do anything because we have it set up. So I'm all for it.
Quick question, I apologize if you see this when I was looking for that slide. But who manages these properties day to day? Is there a professional group that's hired to manage these?
Yeah, so
What's that?
That's the next slide.
Okay. I'll wait.
So that's all pushed back on the developer. So the developer would be responsible for ensuring that there's a management company and all that. So the PFC would not be managing the day-to-day or anything like that on those projects.
So the recourse that we would have if they raise rents beyond what they're allowed to raise, what's the recourse? How do we enforce that?
So we will have the agreement that we have with them, and we would.
The lawsuit, I guess, we'd have to file to enforce that if they raised higher than what they're allowed to raise.
What was the question? I couldn't hear.
If we're not managing these properties day to day, which is good, no one manages day to day, and they decide to raise rents outside of the agreement, how's that enforceable? The lawsuit that you have to go through?
So there is a statutory requirement that 50% has to be below 80, and that's the current statute.
Right.
And y'all discussed you can put in so many at 60, so many at 50, so many at 30, and you're affordable 50%. That's how you get the tax exemption. if you fail to follow the tax exemption, then you're going to be facing losing the exemption. So that criteria is what allows you to get the exemption.
As a leverage, just to.
Right.
Okay.
Can you introduce them?
Yes, I'm sorry, I did not do that before. We
And
have,
there's also a deed restriction. So there's a lot of self-policing that's happened in the program that's not statutorily in there. And so those deed restrictions are ways to put it in the recorded documents so that it's very clear that those are the restrictions for purposes of operations. But that's your stick.
and, sorry, I should have done this earlier. This is Maddie Jones and Paige Mabe from Cooks Roast. And they have been assisting us with establishing the PFC. So if there's nothing else on the expenditure funds, I think we already talked about the projects per year and rehab versus new construction. Y'all have anything else on those points? This is an actual real-life example of a public entity that was going through the same process that we just talked about. So option one, you see there's 0% at 50 and 60% of the AMI, all at 80%, and what that projected revenue would be. Option two, you see some set aside for 50 and 60 at 5%. Option three, some at 10%. And so this is an example of something that we could also bring forward to the board when we have a project to lay out the options and show you how that will affect revenue. So I won't spend too much time on this, but I mentioned this earlier, a limited partnership is created for the purpose of developing and managing the project. And this is the structure. The PFC would own the land and lease it to the partnership. And the PFC may also create a general partner that is a part of the structure as well. Or the developer will create a special limited partner. And it's really up to the developer on which makes financial and just business sense for them. But for the city or for the PFC, it wouldn't really matter. And then there's a limited partnership limited partner that is controlled by the developer and potentially their investor. And this is a similar structure, but this is strictly for LIHTC transactions and how they're structured. It's similar in the fact that the PFC owns the land and leases it to the partnership, but in this instance, there is a general partner that the PFC creates and controls, and the limited partner is the investor, and the special limited partner is the developer. So we already touched on this. There's potential legislation, and here are a few things. Again, we've talked about some of them, but I think one we didn't touch on is requiring the input of the other taxing jurisdictions, which we don't currently have to do. And also to require a specific amount of years for affordability, where right now it's just negotiated on a case-by-case basis.
So if you were to Google Public Facility Corporation in Texas, there's like an article that'll come out from UT Law, and they will basically say these are all the problems with the Public Facility Corporation, right? And it's all of these things that the legislature is looking at changing. But that is to say that these are not requirements. We can form a deal and do right by using the PFC, right? So it's all contractual. So when you see that, if you were to see that, don't think, oh my gosh, staff doesn't know what they're doing. We would be holding them to expectations. It's just that the statute doesn't do that, it doesn't require it. We would have to do that ourselves.
And briefly, I will go over a summary of the formation documents. So if this is something that the City Council wanted us to move forward with, based on feedback today, we would create the Lewisville Public Facility Corporation. The Board of Directors would be made up of you all. The officers would be the President, the Vice President, Treasurer, and Secretary. The Treasurer and Secretary may be employees of the city. It's also subject to the Texas Open Meetings Act, and the meetings also must be conducted in the city. Again, the PFC can issue bonds to finance public projects, but the City Council has to also approve the issuance of bonds as well. As Claire mentioned, the city manager would be the general manager, and the general manager may also appoint an assistant general manager.
Which would be Mary Shaw.
And so next up, again, subject to your feedback, the formation documents will be on the September 19th City Council agenda for your consideration.
What's the cost to get this out?
The cost?
Yes.
Just just the documents.
Yeah. Is there,
Probably a couple $100.
okay.
To file, to file.
Even if it's double that, I'm okay.
It's just the filing fee with
Okay.
the state.
Yeah, we're
I
not,
know we had to bring consultants to do it, and then
Oh, well, I take that back. So, I mean, there are fees associated with, like, we hired attorneys to set up the documents, and, but I think the incorporation documents do allow for the charging, so the city can charge the PFC for those costs, and get reimbursement on that end. But, so there will be consulting costs associated with every deal. You're gonna have to have, especially if you're dealing with bonds, you're gonna have to have your financial, I can't think of them. Advisor, thank you. A financial advisor, legal advisors. I mean, you're gonna wanna make sure you're running through all of the traps before you do any of that.
so the risk is that we set it up now in front of the housing study.
Right.
When we decide not to do it, that's some costs.
So we have we've already, in our budget this year, absorbed the cost of the legal costs related to this. So yes, there are some costs currently to set up the documents. And really, we felt confident that council would want to put this tool, so we normally don't do that, but we felt confident that council would want us to have at least this tool in our toolbox. But no, we wouldn't be spending any additional dollars on anything other than the filing, if you guys wanted to wait till we got the housing study done.
So any other feedback?
Just one point on the cost. When you do the transactional closing, you can include the cost of counsel out of the project cost. So that's part of the mortgageable amount that they would raise to cover your financial advisor, your legal fees, and those things that would be otherwise a cost to the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that.
So I had a question just about, we're gonna be the board, we just meet as needed, like if there's a project that comes to the table, then that initiates the meeting,
Yes.
so, okay.
Unless I'm wrong on that. Is there?
no, I think generally, yes. If anything, it may just be, like I said, meeting initially to make the appointments.
Yeah, it'll be an initial meeting for y'all to just establish who's treasurer and whatever, and after that, it's when we have a deal.
Okay.
Anyone else? So you guys look for direction for us. Ronnie, I think you said you're...
I say we move forward with it. I mean, the study will be here in 4 months. I don't think next week we need to be looking at 10 projects, but, we need to start with the paperwork.
One point of clarification, I was able to get the expiration on Evergreen, and that's actually 2035.
2035.
Okay, 2035.
So I wanted to, sorry.
No, that's fine.
So, just to be clear, if something comes in between now and when the housing study is finished, that, I think we should consider it. I mean, I don't want to not do it just because we don't have our housing study.
Well, we can't do it before the next meeting until we
That's correct, we can't do it for the next meeting.
The other thing, are you comfortable with just 80%, so not going the deeper discounts, if it is a blighted property, like let's say Basswood Manor or Budget Suites or some of our extended stays, are these things that you would want, you'd be willing to hear?
I'm willing to make a deal, yes.
I think that's kind of, that should be at least our initial focus, the low-hanging fruit on areas that we can improve.
That would make a big difference.
And the last thing I want to mention about the meetings that I don't have it in front of me, but there may be annual meetings. Outside of that, it'll be per deal.
Okay.
Every corporation has that.
So you guys have the direction you need?
We sure do.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Next item, 6:45. I think we can get started with micro-mobility, which will be presented by Stacy and I, our parks director.
There's actually going to be a whole crew of us.
Okay.
We travel in vans.
Wow. And who else?
Let's see, maybe Chris Clump.
We'll see.
It's easier just to touch the screen.
1 minute is left.
Yes, I think so.
I don't think so. Here we go.
Okay, well, we want to talk to you today about a program that we've been considering for micromobility. Maybe. And before we get started on what we've been looking about, we want to give a brief explanation of what micromobility is. And it's essentially the idea of having shared use fleets throughout the community that people can use whenever they need maybe that last mile a transportation option, and it can be, you know, either station-based bike share programs, kind of like Z-bikes, or dockless bike share, which maybe that's line bikes if y'all remember those, or scooter shares, which you've probably seen throughout the community. So there's various options that we can look at as we start rolling through considering this program. And in general right now, I think a lot of people have gone away from the station-based bike share just because of how much it costs to maintain those stations, and it really cuts down on flexibility. So a little bit of the history. If you'll remember back in 2018, 2017, one line bike showed up in the city of Louisville, and we were concerned about what was happening down in the Dallas area would reach our fair city. And so we had a bike share program pitched, I think by Councilmember Troyer during the first series of pitches, where we would set up a program that would help us protect against cycle litter. Well, I think that didn't get too much momentum, and along the way, some of the other cities that we typically benchmark against, and the city of Dallas were able to kind of try to put together some mobility plans to kind of experiment with that we could watch happen. And then most recently, in 2022, the e-Blitz scooters arrived. They've been in Old Town, near the Triangle on Corporate Drive, and they were also in Central Park and Thrive footprint. And so we were like, well, maybe it's time that we really need to revisit this, because along the way, Bird, which is another scooter shared use program, reached out and said, hey, we'd like a permit, because they've been experimenting in Dallas and Plano, and they were thinking that we might be a market that they could extend into. And then we've also been thinking about the idea of a mobility plan development, right? Looking to ways that we consider how people move around of our community, not only in vehicles, but as they do so on feet, on bikes, and other small micro-mobility options. We're already on our way to introducing a complete streets policy, looking to where we need to have infrastructure that accommodates complete mobility, not just vehicular mobility. Looking at our thoroughfare plan and how that will be updated. And then of course with the healthy infrastructure plan, we've been looking at how, you know, trails and sidewalks will link people through pedestrian and bicycle connections. But we also need to be thinking that if micro-mobility is going to be accommodated within the trail system, what does that infrastructure and how wide does it need to be so that all, you know, people on foot, on bicycles, and on these e-bikes might be moving throughout there. So as I said, when we went to work and we started looking at what our survey cities are doing, some of them hadn't even tried it or just said outright, we don't want them to get away from us. But what we found was that Dallas and Denton and Plano had some programs either as experiments or have programs in place now that we really liked elements that we thought could work here, especially the city of Plano. And Mindy's going to get up here and talk a little bit about it. And what we really liked about theirs is they approached their entire program from the idea of the last mile, not necessarily recreation. And it really helped them put in a set of standards and ordinances that help control kind of and prevent what happened in Dallas, where it got you know, a little wild down there and there were scooters and things everywhere. So Mindy's going to get up here and talk a little bit about that mobility and sustainability process.
Thank you, Stacy. And I just have to brag on all of the research that was done with our survey cities. Our analyst, Dakota Buchanan, did an amazing job with helping us synthesize this data, and we would not have what we have up here without her hard work. So I want to brag on her for a minute. So to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into kind of how Plano approached this program and their ordinance, we each went to our cohorts in Plano and kind of got their perspective. So we got the parks perspective, we got the sustainability perspective, the public safety perspective, and we asked them some really probing questions about what worked, what didn't work, how did you come up with this idea in the first place, where did this originate, how did it work with integrating with various departments. And they had some really great feedback for us on what their experience has been like with this program. They contributed, like Stacy said, to the success was contributed to this last mile philosophy that you're moving people to where they want to be, and engaging with their partners, both out in the community and those vendors that they have the agreements with. They set up an annual permit agreement that sets those requirements for each provider. It's going to be requirements that we'll get into a little bit later in more detail, but it sets expectations about what the city wants to see from, pardon me for just a moment, I sound like a frog. What the city would like to see from that provider in terms of data, in terms of maintenance of the vehicles, public safety requirements, and just letting that groundwork be in place before you start seeing those issues start coming up. And from the different groups that we all spoke with, they haven't seen issues with their program and their ordinance to date. It's been a very smooth program. They've kind of did a great job of troubleshooting. One of the things that works really well is this idea of the home zone concept, which I'll get to in a little bit more depth in a later slide. And they also have certain areas delineated with what they call geofencing, where you can use technology to prevent scooters or bikes from operating in certain areas where you really don't want that traffic. For instance, in their downtown district, they have a lot of walkability they're trying to encourage. They don't want people zipping through on a scooter. It's a safety concern. And so they geofence some of those areas to either throttle the speed way down or to make it where they're not even operational at all. So there's a lot of flexibility that technology allows us to kind of create a unique environment that fits our needs. They also limit the fleet size in their city. It's kind of interesting. Their limit is 1,000 different scooters or e-bikes across the various vendors. But currently they only have about 110 that are operating at this time. So it's interesting to see how they've set a higher threshold, but the market is really dictating what's happening on the ground in their city and in their community. So they're not really getting flooded with these vehicles everywhere, because it doesn't make sense for these providers to just throw a bunch of them out there and they're not getting used. The existing partners that they currently have, they have a scooter partner and a bicycle partner, and there's different numbers of each that are spread out in the city. And then the ordinance also sets rules that apply for behavior on the end user side and what's expected with both of those situations. So this is a snapshot of the information that's available on their dashboard on the City of Plano's website. It shows a couple of different things that you may find interesting. These home zones here, this is where they're going to have these agreed upon locations where the city and the vendor have come together to see where the priority locations are. They think they're going to be the most desired spots or hot spots for usage. So they want to make sure that they're recentering the scooters there each day. And they have requirements in their permit agreement that the vendor will come out and do that. So you don't wind up with those rogue scooters in undesirable places, because they want to make sure that they're returning back to those home zones where they'll get priority usage. The other thing I want to point out are these little red hashtag areas. Those are the areas where they're going to have the geofencing or the throttling happening, where the scooters won't be operational for reasons that they've set out. So what we're envisioning for our departments coming together, we'll all work together collaboratively to approve these agreements with the vendors, but that sustainability will take the lead in making sure that it goes through this process smoothly and that everyone has the input and agreement that we need to make sure a vendor's approved. The program guidelines will be housed on the city website, along with some safety information for users and basic maps like what Plano has. We'll have the home zone concept just like what Plano has, where we have those spots for the scooters or the bicycles to be relocated at the end of the day. And then the opportunity to have additional short-term geofencing for special events. Say Old Town during Western days, you don't necessarily want those scooters zooming through Western days, so we can set up special geofencing for these short-term events that'll allow us to prevent operations in a place where it doesn't make sense from a public safety standpoint. We have the opportunity to get some really robust data from these vendors as well. We can ask them specifically for what we're looking for. We may be looking for number of rides, how long the rides are, which areas of town are using them, which aren't, so that we can make informed decisions about where we would like the scooters to operate and if we should continue to have them operating. And then this is just a quick flow chart that kind of shows all the different people involved and what that might look like. This is in your backup, so you can kind of delve a little bit deeper if you have questions, but it just shows how we're thinking through the process and we're involving all of our internal stakeholders to make sure that everyone's needs are being met and we're not missing any pieces when we're considering these applications.
have a quick question. So the vendor that we have now in Old Town, since we don't really have a process like this, what kind of, I mean, I assume they have a permit? No.
No, they came in without, like, they just were up one day.
Uh-huh.
They met with Stacy, and they have how many?
Less than 25. Yeah, like it's 6 now.
So basically, we said, hey, we'll let you continue to operate because we were going to get data from them on the usage, and then we were going to move forward with coming up with a plan. So they don't get grandfathered in. They know this is coming, and then in the meantime, Bird has reached out to us as well, saying they want to come in as well.
Okay.
So both of them would fall under this. Bird, when they said we want a permit, we just said, hey, you know what? Well, let's hold off. Let's not add any more until we can get this on the ground.
Okay.
And part of what that
So
is,
just a heads up, we got 5 minutes before we
Okay.
start, so.
I'll try to talk very quickly. Part of what that entails with the fleet size, we do have some ideas on what the total maximum fleet size we would see in the community, and then the amount we would allow per company. The idea being that we want to have a little bit of discretion internally, so you don't have one company coming in and say we have 100 that we're allowing. You don't want Bird to come in with 99 and that leaves only 1 for Blitz. So we're trying to figure out a way to be fair about how we're doing that, but also let the open market dictate how that's going to work as well. So that is something that we have some discretion at the director level to decide how those are divvied up in a fair way. We're looking at potentially a permit fee of $500 for this annual process, and there's some requirements that we would have here, including some liability insurance and indemnity, certain hours of operation where it would just shut down past that time, and then having an escrow $5,000 per 100 units that are deployed. And then for the customer and rider, there would be an easy-to-access app that would have a lot of this information shared through it, some safety components, and then ensuring that those riders have compliance with traffic laws, which we'll get to in just a moment. And then the city has some data requirements that we would like to see, and then some maintenance care of right-of-way, permits, agreements, and so on. And I want to get to what the data looks like. This is a snapshot of the monthly data report that Bird provides to Plano. What's interesting here, you see these little spots. These kind of correspond, if we overlaid that home zone map, it would be almost the same areas. These are the heat maps of where the rides are originating, so it makes sense that they're starting where they're deploying them. And this is the main areas that they're traveling. And then this shows you how far they're going and the total number of rides that they're seeing for each month. So just kind of some anecdotal information that's really interesting that we could kind of dig into once we see this going. So if you want to chat about the laws real quick.
Yeah, so quickly, while the user or the agreement with the companies regulate how they operate, we would need to do an update to the code to enforce the rider and what they do with the scooters. Right now, the only law that governs it is what the state law is, and they can operate on streets less than 35 miles per hour, and they can ride basically anywhere they want. So sidewalks, bicycle paths, everything. So if we don't do anything with the code, that's what we got. So our proposed update to the ordinance would include some things like requiring helmets for under 18, allowing for PD or code enforcement to impound scooters that are, where they shouldn't be, restricting where they can park, preventing the blocking of sidewalks, requiring that the permit agreement be, requires a permit agreement to be operated in the city, and then prohibiting scooters on sidewalks in certain areas, which we were calling no-roll zones. So this would be an area where the scooters would not be allowed to be operated on the sidewalks. They could still be on the streets, but not on the sidewalks. That way we could encourage the walkability of the Old Town area. If we don't put that in the code, we can tell people not to ride on the sidewalks, but there's nothing we can do if they choose to. So then some other areas we included in that were the City Hall grounds, Wayne Ferguson, the Grand Theater, and we for the no-roll zones.
So there's 6:59.
Yeah.
You can just back up.
Yeah, because I had a question.
I got questions.
Yeah.
We can come back.
Okay, we're just leave this here, right?
time is now 7:01, and we have a quorum. We will begin with the invocation by Councilwoman Ronnie Cade.
Seeing how yesterday was a day that has changed all of our lives forever, I would just like us to take a moment of silence in appreciation for what this country still has. Thank you.
Please join me in the pledges to the American and Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor to the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
And our next item will be proclamations, September 2022 as Live United Month. Do we have someone? Needs and responding to them for 69 years, and whereas United Way of Denton County is unparalleled in the power to assemble partners, providers, and resources to address the needs of neighbors in crisis, and whereas United Way of Denton County leads the effort to provide greater opportunity for every person in Denton County and works with a network of nonprofits, government, business across the county to respond to our community's immediate needs and seek out better solutions for larger community-wide issues. Now, therefore, for T.J. Gilmore, Mayor of the City of Louisville, and on behalf of the Louisville City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2022 as Live United Month, and proudly join United Way of Denton County in calling on all of our residents of Louisville, Texas to give, advocate, and volunteer as we live united to build a healthier Denton County for all of us. Proclaim this day of the 12th day of December 2022. And Mr. Henderson, anyone want to speak?
No, you go ahead.
Thank you so much. Well, the relationship between the City of Louisville and United Way dates back 3 decades. I mean, we were pretty young, City Manager Powell, when that happened. And you really renew it every year. Your employees give generously. You just wrapped up your Pacesetter campaign, so thank you to the City of Louisville, your staff, for giving generously, but also your partnership across the county to repair broken systems, mental health systems, housing crisis response systems, and then systems for our seniors. We're going to meet tomorrow to talk about ALICE households, asset-limited, income-constrained households that are employed and due to rising housing costs are at risk of becoming homeless. We typically think of young moms with kids, but really that face is becoming not only our children, but our parents as well. So we thank you so much, Council Member, Council, City Manager Powell. We appreciate so much the partnership. Councilmember Troyer for serving on the Denton County Workforce Success Leadership Team. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Did you want to take a picture?
I would love to. The board boss.
Moving on to our first public hearing, consideration of the proposal of the FY 2022-23 budget. In accordance with state law and city charter, a public hearing is being held on the proposed FY 22-23 budget, available on the city's website in the city secretary's office and at the library. To provide an opportunity for citizen comment, the proposed budget includes changes made by city council at the budget workshop held on August 6th. An agenda item to adopt the budget is also on tonight's city council meeting. The public hearing and vote on the tax rate will be held at the City Council meeting on September 19, 2022. The recommendation is that the City Council conduct the public hearing as set forth in the caption above. Do we have any speakers?
No, sir, we do not.
I'll accept a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
you've heard the motion. Council, please vote. The motion passes unanimously. Visitor Citizen Forum. Speakers must address their comments to the mayor rather than to individual council members or staff. Speakers should speak clearly and state their name and address prior to beginning their remarks. Speakers will be allowed 5 minutes for testimony. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slandered remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council is restricted from discussing or taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Action can only be taken on a future meeting. Do we have any comment, Doris?
Mayor Pro Tem, we have a number of speakers tonight. The first speaker is Nancy Sansom.
Welcome, Ms. Sansom. Name and address for the
Good evening.
record.
I'm Nancy Sansom, and I reside at 415 South Garden Ridge Boulevard, and I've been a resident there for 5 years. We're very glad this evening to share our concerns with you a second time at tonight's meeting. I do have packets I'd like to get passed out to all of you and the management staff, so could I hand them to Claire? Okay. Okay, we represent Louisville seniors, all of Louisville. And we represent seniors that are concerned with getting fair, low, and fixed income housing and rent. We'd like to congratulate the city and the board members, Alicia and her group, on their Serve Louisville plans for the 1001 Edmond property. The plan to renovate and remodel the property for the purpose of partnership within the identified 5 focus areas will be very helpful, and especially in the much-needed area covering rent and utilities. So moving on, let's review the Texas Department of Housing Rental Income Chart, and it is on the first page of your packet. It says Texas Department of Housing and, Okay, if you look at those 2 charts, it plainly explains income limits that are outlined in yellow, whereas the Louisville seniors' yearly income is at the 20 to 30% on that first chart. And however, at the 60% level on that first chart, the current affordable market rent, seniors are not in a position to afford this high rent level because of their current and future low and fixed incomes. So we applaud Louisville Senior Council, the management and staff for their efforts in supporting the Edmund Fox multifamily project. We also encourage rezoning for more low-income senior and mixed family units and properties, also granny units. The redevelopment of vacant existing commercial and properties is happening in Plano. The city of Plano is currently redeveloping and remodeling the vacant Collins Mall property to provide for their rental and housing and multifamily units, tight market there. Consider similar plans for Louisville with our many empty commercial buildings. It is the understanding that developers and builders make use of the federally funded 15-year 9% tax credit option. Following this time period, the properties are often sold to new investors and corporations. This group then proceeds to raise the rents to unaffordable 60%. When we moved in, we were on the and still are, in the low and fixed income rent of 20 to 30%. This causes major hardships for many seniors and others trying to survive on their low and fixed income. So in conclusion, would you look at our petition? We have signed a petition, and we're wanting to support fair housing and rent. So what I would say, let's stop exploiting tenants of low income by requiring, raising required rents to the 60% level. It is making it impossible for seniors to survive. We need expedient relief for the heavy and unfair rent burdens. Finally, we want to thank you for this opportunity to explain our housing and rent dilemma. Also, we welcome an opportunity to work with the city council and city management, as we did before with the DACA bus system a few years ago, and finding a solution to this immediate housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sansom.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Spencer Burridge.
I was not as prepared, and I have a single piece of paper for, I guess, you guys to review and pass down. So, start on this side? It's fine. Okay.
Mr. Burridge, if you would please put your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Spencer Burridge. My address is 589 Elm Creek Drive. So, I'm here to talk about a non-agenda item regarding my opposition to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Pier 121 Marina Expansion Project proposal. This includes an RV campground, expanded RV storage, camping sites, a lakeside lodge, skills training facility, and surf beach. All this is fantastic. I have no issues with any of these things. The problem I have is specifically with the location. The thing is, this proposal just simply won't work with the infrastructure that exists in this area today. There is a narrow single lane road between Marina Vista and Lake Ridge. You can see on the pictures that I shared. And this is going to be one of the 3 obvious entrances to this particular location. And I just don't see how forcing them to do a 90-degree turn in large RVs and boats is going to result in a good time. In addition to that, there is a park right next to this neighborhood where this entrance would be called East Hill Park. Fantastic park, my kids love it. But there is a pedestrian crosswalk in that area that it doesn't have any lights or anything. It's just a single yellow sign. Drivers just blast past it all the time. Doesn't even say yield or slow down or anything on it. And I guess drivers don't really pay attention. So crossing that is very dangerous. With the increase of traffic that this would bring, it's not going to get any safer. It's not going to get any better. Today, my kids are not allowed to cross there without a parent being with them because there's just no lights, no signs, nothing that is obvious enough for drivers to make this safe. And I understand controlling driver behavior is very difficult to do. But what we have today is just not working. The additional issues that we have is, that's the main issues that I have. There's a couple more, but there is some, I don't want to just give you issues. I want to provide some potential solutions. We've already brought this up, our concerns, to the U.S. Corps. We also have sent emails to a lot of you regarding our opposition to this. But one of the things that if we are going to go through with this, there's a couple of suggestions I have that we need to do at a bare minimum. We do need to make that crosswalk more safe somehow. McKinney has underground tunnels. I think that would be a little crazy considering the space constraints, but there's got to be something, lights or something that can be installed there. I don't know how, but I feel like these lanes need to be expanded. If we're going to have RVs crossing through there, a single lane is just not going to work, having a 90-degree turn to get in. Or we need to have some signs on Leora Lane, which is a larger road, that is the more obvious choice that says this is our entrance, and maybe signs that say no boats and RVs and some of these smaller roads that are next to all of these neighborhoods. The other thing is speed bumps. My neighborhood does not have any speed bumps. You'll see on the images that I shared that a lot of people are going to start cutting through our neighborhood because it's a way to skip the stop sign, the stop sign. So we need speed bumps there or something if we're going to have people starting to cut through because of this increased traffic, and signs that say no through traffic on our neighborhood.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Victor Tobin.
Hello, my name is Victor Tobin. I live at 1152 Analia Cove Drive, and I'm also here to speak opposition to the Pier 121 Marina expansion. My property actually backs up directly to the core land. We bought that, we purchased it and had it built new in 2007. We waited a year for it to be built, and we picked that lot specifically for the privacy. And now it looks like they're gonna build an RV park, and not just a small RV park. They're looking at 100 spaces, and they're gonna back up directly to my back fence line. So I have some real concerns about privacy, noise, crime. I mean, you name it. Real concerns about that. I know that there's a lot of RV parks around the lake, but I'm not sure that any of them have 100 spaces. So it seems like they could scale that down quite a bit. And, you know, maybe increase. I know there's going to be a lodge that said it had 50 rooms. Why not make the lodge have 100 rooms? I'm not exactly sure, but there needs to be a bigger barrier, or I'd like to see a bigger barrier between these RV spots and my backyard.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Tobin.
Our next speaker is W. Elliott Beard.
Go ahead and start.
When you're ready, go right ahead.
Alrighty. Elliott Beard, 620 Mandalay Bay Drive, in the Meridian neighborhood next to the proposed marina development. I have emailed and spoken with some of y'all. I regret that I have not spoken with all of y'all, so apologies to those I have not successfully reached. But thank you for your time to those that I have. Some of the same comments and some others. I know in a perfect world, I really oppose all of it for the additional traffic, et cetera. But realistically, I mean, I'm an engineer, I'm a realist, I believe in compromise. I think that there's a lot of money to be made with the western half of the development that has the lodge and the beach and all that fun stuff. I think the marina can make a ton of money over there. And having the RV park and camping butt up to our neighborhood with no buffer just seems unreasonable. As far as a city view of things, I know that property values matter, taxes matter, happy, stable citizens matter, and I feel quite sure that a lot of people along Analia Cove that butt up directly against this development will leave. I think that will become a row of rental houses, and I think it will bring the entire value down for the entire neighborhood. I am on the opposite side of the neighborhood, to be crystal clear, and if I were looking at a house here on Google Maps and I saw an RV park next door, I wouldn't buy there. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't even consider it. I have a lot of friends who have RVs. I know people who have very nice RVs who have far more money than I do. But ultimately, it's a transient neighborhood, and it's not our neighbors. It's a noise, light pollution, more litter, far more traffic, and it's just right there. There's no buffer. So I think that the Corps could scale back its development substantially and still make a lot of money. I shared pictures with some of y'all. You could cut the side basically in half. That large green space where they're putting the 100, I think it's 100 plus RVs, and the campsites, you could get rid of all that, expand the lodge as others have mentioned, et cetera, And I think it'd be very fair. I think the marina could still make a ton of money, and it would be a nice compromise for everyone. We do still need to address the infrastructure, as was brought up before me, so I don't want to reiterate. I think that that's a major problem. I think we will have notable increased traffic, and I'm not really sure what to do about that, aside from widening the road, which is kind of a major ordeal. So I don't have all the answers, except I know that for the Meridian neighborhood, and I believe it's called King's Station or King's Cross or something just south of us, I know there are a lot of strong feelings in the neighborhood as well about the RV park specifically and the campsites just being right there. So I do think it's in the city's best interest to keep long-term residents, a lot of which have been there since day one in this neighborhood. The stability and the values and the tax implications are all in the city's best interest as well as ours. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Beard.
Our next speaker is Patel Sanal.
Hello everyone, this is Sonal Patel and I reside right across Mr. Elliott on 625 Mandalay Bay Drive. We have been living in this neighborhood ever since this neighborhood built. It was in 2006. I mean, it's very concerning for us. My kids has grown up, they are in the college already, but I can tell that, you know, bringing the RVs into this area, it's not gonna be safer for ourselves because me and my husband, we just live together in a huge house now. It's not gonna be safety concern, I would say. I honestly don't think, you know, it's a better kind of like environment for us to bring this kind of RV situations in the neighborhood. And I do agree with whatever those two gentlemen says earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patel.
So I'm only going to attempt the first name on this one. I'm sorry. Praywal? You're not speaking? Okay. All right.
But I'm assuming you're in support of the comments that have been made. Thank you, sir.
Our last speaker on Visitor Citizen Forum is Brian Brenda.
My name's Brian Brenda. I live at 1148 Analia Cove Drive, which backs up to the proposed development. I'm basically 100% opposed to the whole thing. One big issue I have is that this is taxpayer-funded money that the Army Corps of Engineers takes, and I believe that they should be preserving land and working on civic projects only. And I think it is a horrible example of just crony capitalism to take that money for the benefit of a private developer. So I'm 100% against that. The other thing is it's going to introduce a massive transient population of several hundred directly behind an existing community to just completely destroy home values along the west side of Analia Cove Drive. Virtually everybody bought that land under the original zoning that it would be preserved, untouched, for the benefit of the wildlife, the natural habitat that exists there. I run a game camera. There's just white-tailed deer, turkey, bobcat, fox. You just can't get that anyplace else. And as others have pointed out, I completely looked at the neighborhood, saw the buffer of the lake, what we thought was a buffer with the Army Corps of Engineers land, and then also Eastfield Park itself. I would have just, nobody on the, probably the entire west side of Analia Cove would have touched this neighborhood with an RV park. It'd just be like, move on to the other several hundred properties that litter DFW that don't have an RV park there. The other thing that I don't like is it's just a wanton destruction of the land. It's a horrible project that clear cuts the entire thing, done as cheaply as possibly in the most disastrous environmental impact you could possibly achieve. It also cuts through a little known complete contiguous wildlife migration path that exists from Leela to the west, goes all the way up the corridor of 121, Business 121, to Meridian, to the north of our neighborhood, all the way around to Stewart Creek Peninsula Park. It is a contiguous land that will just be cut off from all the wildlife migration patterns. The other thing I don't like is that I found a lot of material, just differences in the Army Corps' presentation, so I'm not even sure how the size of the RV park and stuff like that. In one spot it says like 100 RV spaces on page 6, and then storage of 500, and then I counted 335 in a diagram. So I'm not even sure what the exact plan of this thing is, and personally I think it was materially misrepresented in the diagram because that was the visual. The numbers are way off, so I'm not even sure what this thing represents. They're off on the camping cabin sites. I just don't feel they're being really upfront and honest with us from the start. And I just really pretty much agree with everybody else, but I think the whole thing is just a horrible idea. I think it works great as is, as a day use neighborhood facility that the people come in, use their boats, they go home at night, and it works well. So why fix something that isn't broken? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brenda.
Mayor, I'd like to have Stacy and I step out with that group on Pier 121 just so she could answer some questions and be a resource to them.
And I also, and I'm sure I'm speaking for the rest of council on this one, I want to appreciate and thank you all for reaching out to us with your concerns. We did bundle those materials in with our concerns as well. City staff has specific technical concerns. So we're watching the project and doing everything that we can to make sure that what we can do, we will do.
We really do appreciate your guys' comments. We didn't see those, and they were awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Item F, consent agenda. All of the following items on the consent agenda are considered to be self-explanatory by the council and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests. For a citizen to request removal of an item, a speaker card or e-comment must be filled out and submitted to the city secretary. I do not have any speaker cards or e-comments regarding the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you would please vote. Consent agenda has been approved, 6-0. Thank you, council. Item G, regular hearing, consideration of a variance to the Louisville City Code, section 6-92, paving, subsection I, driveways for a residential driveway greater than 24 feet in width, as requested by Tim Tench, the property owner. The property owner is adding on to the home at 867 Stone Circle Lane and would like to add a gated paved parking space on the side of the house and widen the driveway approach on the alley. The maximum width of a residential driveway is 24 feet. The existing drive is approximately 26 feet wide, and the proposed addition would add approximately 15 feet for a total of 41 feet in width. It is recommended that the City Council consider the variance as set forth in the caption above, and we do have our city engineer, Mr. David Salmon, available for questions. I do have the owner, Tim Tench, here available to speak in support. And Mr. Tench, if you could please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Tim Tench, 667 Stone Circle Lane. I've got an packet of information I put together.
Sure.
So this isn't heavy stuff like you just heard here. I just want to widen my driveway out a little bit. As you'll see in the packet, we're expanding out to the side, putting a new drive in, and without widening the approach, we won't be able to drive effectively into the driveway. So I've got a little bit of information I put together. One's a letter from the HOA approving the project. Then there's a top view of the project, the survey, and then a signed letter by each of my neighbors that I had access to saying that they took no exception to the project and understand the 24-foot limit and want to widen it out. Then I've got pictures that I kind of put together using the computer, showing what it'll look like with it done as proposed, and then some other options if we aren't allowed to widen the approach. As you can see, each of those options don't make a lot of sense. You would kind of after the fact come and look at it and you would say, hey, why'd they do this? You know, this doesn't make a lot of sense. It would also introduce a lot of erosion. The reason for the project, initially, all of our neighbors in this area have retaining walls, and so we were adding one as part of the project, but to be able to get the vehicle up and down, you know, that obviously needs to be concrete. If it's rock or grass or some other thing, it's going to wash out into the alley, and that's the problem that we've had since we've lived in the house. The hill is too steep, and it washes our soil down into the alley on the regular, so always have to clean that up. We're constantly losing soil, so there's that. And then the last piece of information here is a screenshot I took of the immediate neighborhood. Now, it's not all of Castle Hill, it's just kind of the immediate area where we're at. It didn't come out very good in the copy, but there's red numbers listed on every approach that is wider than 30 feet. I didn't start at 24, started right at 30. And you can see there's tons of 34s, 46, 45. The largest one in the neighborhood is 65 feet. I guess when this was done, it wasn't part of Louisville. I guess that ordinance didn't apply at that point, but really, I'd appreciate it very much if you guys would approve the variance to let me expand it a little bit. It still won't be the widest in the neighborhood, but I'll have access to use it, and there's really no harm to really anybody, the neighborhood, the city. There's no loser in the situation here, so I would appreciate it if you guys would grant the variance.
What am I missing?
I have some questions.
Yeah, I was gonna I'll open it up for questions. Is that what we're doing? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Mr. Tench, thank you. I think council has a couple of questions or comments, so if you wouldn't mind staying there. Okay. Appreciate it.
Actually, my first question is going to be for Richard. Or David, one of the two. So my question is, and we have an ordinance that says that our maximum width is supposed to be 24 feet. So can you explain why we have that requirement? Why do we have that in there? What's the purpose for that regulation?
Well, I mean, as a general rule, you want to control the width of driveways so people know where to expect to have people pulling in and out. Otherwise, you know, I guess my best example would be head-in parking. You know, you don't want your streets or your alleys basically to become head-in parking. So, you know, that's the general rule.
Okay. So I was just, you know, I mean, I'm in development as well. I know that sometimes rules get written because there was an application for it when the rules were written, and over time it just doesn't apply. So I'm trying to consider, you know, does this still apply and why? And I respect you wanting to do this at your property. But in looking at this, I cannot look at this as one single property, because I have to look at this if we approve this, then we set a precedent to approve wider than 24 feet on every driveway in the city, unless there is something specific about this property that makes it unique that I could point to. I'm really not, hold on just a second. I'm really not getting what that is. And in fact, what I'm hearing the purpose being is for, you know, more, we can expect that there's gonna be traffic here or there, you know, and limiting the space where it can be coming out. I mean, this is right at a corner too. So actually my concern for the access is more so on this property. And to be clear, it looks like staff was pretty clear about what our standards were. And, you know, somebody decided to go ahead and form it up to to ignore what the city was saying. But regardless, I think for me, I can't look at it as this one project. It has to be either all or none, because I cannot distinguish this from anything else in the city. And if I approve this, I have to approve every single one that comes behind it, and I do not want to set that precedent.
Other comments?
Yeah, so thank you for those comments. I appreciate that. So I've been out, and I've actually, Mr. Tench, would you like to speak first before I comment? You raised your hand.
One thing I forgot to mention, a little nervous, I haven't spoken for
take your time.
like
It's
this
all right.
before, but part of the kind of original part of the land here is I have almost 200 feet that approaches the alley, right? Where it's a diamond-shaped lot. There's a section of the lot that you can't really access without these improvements. So generally, you might have 30 or 40-foot wide lots, and 24 feet would take up about half of that. So that's where it starts to make sense. I think when you look at a irregular lot in a cul-de-sac situation, it is a special situation.
So I've been to the property. I've seen it. The pictures are okay, but when you see the property in person, it's a very odd-shaped lot. It's right on the corner. If that's grass, it's going to be driven over all the time. Trucks are going to hit it, things like that. I will say that it's an alley, so nobody's asking for a 40-foot driveway, and it's on the front entrance somewhere, so there's not a concern about aesthetics in the neighborhood. The Master Association's approved it. All your neighbors have also signed off on it. I've been coming to, even before I was in the city council, I've been coming to meetings for probably 8 years. It seems like on any given meeting, half of the agenda is approving variances, and we're not concerned about every one of these variances causing a flood of everybody else wanting to do what they want to do. So I have very low concern, respectfully, that this is going to cause everybody to want to have 50-foot driveways. I do think we can go through and we can look at other requests that come in and compare them to this request. Is it an odd-shaped lot? Is it in a corner? Is it an alley? Is it a rear entry? And make general good decisions based upon that precedent.
Thank you. Other comments? Questions? Concerns?
I will just say that it is a very strange shaped lot. And I assume do you have an RV now that we're talking about
No.
RVs tonight? Okay.
No argument.
It's like, I don't even know how you would get that in there from that alley.
It's just to park my truck. My wife uses the garage as a gym since the COVID happened, so I can't park in there anymore.
Happy spouse, happy house.
Yeah. She's getting the new kitchen, and I'm getting a spot to park my truck at. Well, I'm trying to anyway.
Other comments?
I'll just make a comment. I may be on the exception on this, but I don't really have a problem with this. I mean, I first want to applaud you on the package you put together.
Yes.
It's, just way more than we get a lot of times, so I applaud you on putting that together. It is an odd-shaped lot. I don't think this is every case in every neighborhood, so I personally would not be opposed to this.
Other comments? All right, council, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve. Council, if you would please vote. Motion passes 5-1. Mr. Tench, thank you so much for your time.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Item 18. Consideration of 2 variances to the Louisville City Code, Section 6-144, screening devices for Bethel Baptist Church, a proposed church located at 1680 South Edmonds Lane, as requested by Clay Christie, Claymore Engineering, on behalf of the property owner. Case number 22-08-5-V. Bethel Baptist Church is planning to relocate to the subject site. The engineering site plan for the new church building is pending approval of these variance requests. The applicant is requesting the following 2 variances. A, to allow increased landscaping in lieu of required screening along the western property line, and B, to allow the existing wood fence and live vegetation to serve as screening in lieu of the required screening along the southern property line. Letters of support have been provided and staff has no objection to either request. It's recommended that the City Council approve the 2 variances as set forth in the caption above, and we do have Mr. Richard Ludke, our Planning Director, available for questions. Council, I'll entertain a motion if there's no discussion.
Move to approve the variances.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you'd please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Item 19, consideration of an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2022-2023 operating budget. The proposed operating budget for all funds have been prepared by staff and reviewed by the City Council. Approval of this ordinance adopts an operating budget for these funds beginning October 1, 2022 and ending September 30th, 2023. A draft budget document is available for public review at the City Secretary's office, the library, and on the City website. It's recommended that the City Council approve the proposed ordinance as set forth in the caption above. Council, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Louisville, Texas, adopting and approving a budget for the City of Louisville, Texas for the year beginning October 1st, 2022 and ending September 30th, 2023, providing for an effective date and declaring an emergency.
Council, if you'd please vote. Item passes 6-0. Item 20, consideration of an ordinance of the City of Louisville approving the 2022-2023 annual service plan update to the service and assessment plan and assessment roll for public improvements for the Josey Lane Public Improvement District with Chapter 372 Texas Local Government Code as amended. On October 6, 2014, the city created the Josey Lane Public Improvement District for the construction of street and water wastewater improvements in a designated area located along Josey Lane north of FM 544 and south of Windhaven Drive. State statutes require an update to the service plan and assessment roll be considered and approved by City Council to provide for the annual levy and collection of special assessments. This plan identifies public improvement costs to be provided by the PID along with the manner of assessing the property in the PID and the assessment roll. The plan is required to be recorded with the county clerk within 7 days of approval and passage. It is recommended that the City Council approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption above. If there are no comments, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the City of Louisville approving the 2022-2023 annual service plan update to the service and assessment plan and assessment roll for public improvements for the Josey Lane Public Improvement District with Chapter 372 Texas Local Government Code as amended, providing a repeal or severability and an effective date and declaring an emergency.
Council, if you'd please vote. Motion passes 6-0. All right. Item H, reports. So reports about items of community interest regarding which no action will be taken. I'd like to start with Councilmember Green tonight.
Okay, there is an event in Old Town tomorrow night at the Grand Theater. The City of Louisville is inviting residents to the first of its kind Nothing But Net public event to learn about exciting ways to engage with their community. The event is, like I said, tomorrow night from 6:30 to 8:30. This event is created as part of the Neighborhood Engagement Task Force designed to help residents learn ways to engage their neighbors, learn about city programs to help spruce up and revitalize their homes and neighborhoods, and learn how to create personal neighborhood emergency preparedness plan. I think we've got the police department going to be out there, the fire department with some of their toys. We've got some food trucks coming at 6:30. There's going to be some presentations, I think, beginning at 7 p.m. SWAT vehicle is going to be out there. There's going to be a drone demo, which should be pretty cool. And I will leave my dog at home because she wants to eat the drone. And there's also going to be some hoops contest with prizes and giveaways provided by Huffine Chevrolet. So it's going to be a really cool event, and hope to see you there.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
No report.
No
Councilmember
report.
Cade? City Manager? Councilmember Meredith?
Yeah, before I get to the library part, just want to mention the PBR rodeo this weekend. I know Mr. Ferris has done a lot of work on that. Looking forward to that. It was a great event last year. I'm sure it'll be even better this year. Some library items for the week. DIY bookmarks, Tuesday, September 13th, 5 to 6 p.m. No registration required at the Bennett Program Room. Mortgage Assistance Open House, Wednesday, September 14th, 5 to 8 p.m. No registration required, small conference room. Ballet Folklorico, Saturday, September 17th, 11 a.m. to noon. No registration required at the Bennett Children's Wing, and that's all I've got.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Troyer?
Okay, I have some events and performances going on at the Grand Theater. First of all, opera presented by the Louisville Lake Symphony on September 16th. And of course, the big event for the next, in the next couple weeks, besides the PBR Rodeo, which I'm looking forward to, is our Western Days Festival with many performances and locations. This is presented by the City of Louisville, September 23rd and 24th. Councilman Meredith failed to mention that we do have the Huffines Cattle Drive Parade in conjunction with the rodeo next Saturday afternoon, so that's going to be a fun event. Just watch out for the Longhorns. And then we have other additional performances, acoustic jam sessions presented by the Visual Art League of Louisville, and that's every Friday night, 6 to 9. Some activities going on, and Councilmember Green took my first one, so the First Fall Nothing But Net event is going on, as she said, tomorrow night, September 13th. There's also an Art Talk Golden Products demo presented by the Visual Art League of Louisville, and that will also be tomorrow night, September 13th. There's a Garden Secrets class, Plant Propagation, presented by Keep Louisville Beautiful, which is on September 15th. And there are some exhibitions, Volunteer of the Year, Jackie Hogan, Vanishing Arts Acts, presented by the Visual Art League of Louisville through September 17th. Watershed Urbanism and the DFW Metroplex, presented by the University of Austin at Arlington and the City of Louisville, and that also goes on through the 17th of September. Mystery Metals, Art and Photography by Tina Alvarez, presented by the City of Louisville. That exhibition is going on through October 29th. And finally, Limited Palette, presented by the Visual Art League of Louisville. That exhibition will go from September 24th to October 22nd. And that is all I have.
Need the green light. Thank you, sir. City Attorney, City Secretary, Officer, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you. What do we got?
Nothing to report, Mayor.
All right.
No report, Mayor.
No report. Thanks, sir.
No report, Mayor.
You? Oh, we got to have a lake level.
Lake level report. Louisville Lake is currently at 518.61 feet in elevation, and that is about 84 to 85% capacity right now.
All right, thank you.
Just a shout out to Animal Services staff. 2 weeks prior to clear the shelter, we had over 70 adoptions.
Awesome.
Awesome. A lot of hard work from staff.
Doesn't mean y'all can't go out and adopt again, because they still need help out there. So please, if you are looking for some four-legged companionship, we've got great options out there for you.
Definitely.
Chief?
No report.
Mr. Ferris?
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Green?
Nope.
Kelly Green. Good night. It's been a day.
I'll take it. No report.
Nothing. Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate you. With that, I do want to encourage everybody, if you just heard all of this litany of what's going on, and it's like drinking from a fire hose, believe me, it is. But there's so many cool things that happen over the next couple of months, 3 months here in Louisville. I would encourage everybody to hop onto the city website and just type in newsletter up in the search field, and they will get you to a list of different newsletters that the city provides that have all of this type of information, so you can plan great excursions, weekends, weekdays, to learn more about your city and participate and have a great time. So if you get a chance, hop on their City of Louisville website and just type in newsletter. With that, we are going to return to the workshop and finish up that conversation. sons of a guns. I deserve it. I earned that.
It says you can't have one of the elected officials.
And that's why we're labeled. Like, he knew it too.
No, I knew it. This is such a surprise. Let's see if this one actually works. Where's that?
No, that one's good.
That was good.
Thank you very much.
Nice distraction. I'm watching you go through my mail and I'm like, oh.
It was in my box. I thought that was an odd way.
All right, let's go ahead and pick the workshop back up where we left off.
Well, where did we leave off? You were doing the one slide.
Don't ask me where we left off.
You were done. You were done.
So, our next steps are to get direction from City Council that having a micromobility program is something that you're interested in. And then send the draft ordinance over for legal review and finalize our program guidelines and applications. And what we're planning on doing is the program guidelines to kind of be modeled after how we set up the food truck program. So we have a pretty robust set of guidelines that as people apply for the program, they have to understand what they'll be required to do and to meet those standards. We're looking at total max right now, allowing 150 units in town. Now, to give some perspective, I know Mindy probably mentioned this earlier, is that Plano has allocated 1,000 units to be allowed in their city limits, and they're hovering at like 120, 130 right now. So the market is going to dictate what we can bear. We'll also be working on how we can determine those allocations with the vendors and figuring out where those home zones should be with their input, right? Especially like ePlits already has some market data about what works. Bird has market data about where in Plano has been working, where similar sites in Louisville will work. And really look at making sure that when we establish the home zones with the applicants and, city staff, is that we're looking to make sure that we maintain visibility as cars pull up and need to move around intersections, that we of course maintain ADA access and address any public safety concerns. And we also want to make sure that as we build our website and get the program running, that we have public education for the end users. Because right now we're building a program that details how we interact with the vendors, right? And putting in some ordinances that say how an end user should utilize the program and practice best practices for safety, wearing a helmet and all that kind of stuff. But we need to make sure that not only the program applicants have that on their application, on their apps, on their phones, but also what we provide. And then we'll need to, once we settle on the fee, amend the fee schedule. And our ultimate goal is to have this program established by the end of the year so that we're rolling into 2023 with the new program.
That's a good time.
Someone would catch it.
So wanted to get your feedback, obviously, and see what your thoughts or concerns. I know you guys said you had some questions, so.
I have a question. First of all, I think we need something. Otherwise, we really don't have a whole lot of control. So when somebody uses one of these, I'm just worried about liability. So if somebody gets on this thing and they have an accident, who is liable for that? Do they have to sign an agreement that says, I agree to, a waiver, because obviously they don't have insurance, but if they cause damage to somebody's car or whatever, somebody has to pay for that. How does that work?
When they start the ride through the app, that's a part of the sign-up process. When they create their user ID and put in their payment information and all of that, they're agreeing to that liability with the vendor. So that's
okay. So we stay out of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a waiver basically that they would enter into with that vendor that's providing the unit that they're renting.
Okay.
So 150 units is, I guess, is not a whole lot. We actually worked in Oaklawn, Highland Park when about a bunch of these got dropped off. Some ended up in the Trinity River. So what do we have with the company that puts these on? Let's say they just walk away and we're left with is there any kind of recourse other than just saying?
Right, so one of the things that we want to ask for is at the onset, when we establish a permit with one of the vendors, is that they have an escrow account of $5,000. So if there's something where we get, you know, a bunch dumped, maybe like in Timber Creek, they cause Timber Creek damage and they cause us issues with having to dispose of them, that we can take from that escrow and for the damages that are incurred. And we have to deal
At
with.
the end of the year, if there's no damage and they don't renew, do they get it back?
Yes.
They get it, the escrow back?
Yeah, so it's only if there's damage, so if they don't renew.
If they don't renew.
If they don't renew.
If they
And
decide
if they renew, it
not-
just rolls.
So I think one of our first conversations was actually around this particular topic. I've kind of come full circle on this. Every time I come to Old Town, I look for the scooters to see if it's either going to reinforce my bias or not, but they're always neat. They're always right where they should be. They do a really good job with just that limited substance. So I like that. I withdraw my complaint in the first place.
I was preparing everyone.
Yeah. We're all ready to know.
And one of the things that's really great about the way that the home zone process works is it lets us have real-time input into what's working and what's not. And if we see that the current system isn't working, it gives us opportunities to provide that input and tweak the way the program is laid out in the city.
The other thing to realize is if this, I don't think this will be disastrous, but let's say we just don't like it. In a year's time, we can amend our ordinance. There's no obligation to allow them to continue the permits for a year and we just discontinue it in a year. Or if we decide it's going great and we want to expand it, we can expand it. It's just, we can look at it year to year.
Well, having survived the great lion bite, because I know when I saw those scooters, I was calling, like, hey, what the heck's going on? It's been a lot better than we had before. I think the ordinance will just help clear it up. So I wouldn't say I'm for it, but I'm not against it. So I'll take half.
As anyone who was here when, back in the day, here, years ago, with the
BC,
BC,
before COVID.
Before COVID, yes. I'm definitely for this. I've been for it for a long time, so I think we need the regulations so that we can control what goes on.
Is there, and I may have missed this, my apologies, has there been any conversation with DCTA about these? Okay.
We're working on creating a home zone that would work with the transit station, the train station. We've been in touch with staff and we're working on that currently.
I just see where they could, that would be a natural focal point for these types of vehicles, so, okay. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you.
All right, we done with workshop?
Yes, we are.
All right. Then we need to go back out there so that we can come back in here for closed session.
But we're getting our steps in. Sorry, we're getting those steps in.
That was so
Oh.
All right, council is done with workshop, but we are now going to move into closed session. In accordance with Texas Government Code Subchapter D, Section 551.072, Real Estate Property Acquisitions, Section 551.087, Economic Development, Deliberation regarding Economic Development Negotiations, and Section 551.074, Personnel, A, City Manager Claire Powell, B, City Secretary Julie Wooster, C, City Attorney Elizabeth Plaster, D, Chief Municipal Court Judge Brian Holman, and E, Alternate Municipal Court Judges. We will break into closed session.
No, because we're going to be done. We're getting out of here in a couple minutes. So.
Freshman speed reading class.
Here we go. So first of all, we wanted to make a public comment regarding compensation for our city manager, Claire Powell. She has asked, as a leader of this organization, that her compensation be adjusted to the average when we have our salary survey of other cities. She doesn't feel that it's fair for her to go out with a compensation increase while we're waiting for the rest of the staff to get theirs. So I think that's exemplary move from leadership, and I really appreciate that you want to take that time and make sure that the team is taken care of first. So council's going to be holding off on that decision until we get the numbers.
Do we have to make a formal table on that or not? Okay.
Yeah, it's just, that's how we're going to do it when it comes back around. So, so that is for City Manager Claire Powell. We do have 3 motions to make regarding contract amendments. Councilmember Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first amendment will be, I move to amend Liz Plaster's employment agreement by providing that in addition to payment of sick leave in accordance with current city policy for all full-time employees, as it now exists or may hereafter be amended by the City Council, if she has accrued the maximum hours of sick leave at the end of the fiscal year, the city shall contribute a dollar amount equal to 15 days of sick leave as a contribution to her City of Louisville Supplemental Retirement 401A plan on the last day of each fiscal year and at retirement.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Next motion, I move to amend Julie Wooster's severance agreement by, upon notice of her retirement, allowing her to use up to 160 hours of accrued sick leave in her last month of employment on the condition that she is available to the new city secretary and city staff for orientation, questions, and other city-related matters, and by requiring at least 60 days notice of her retirement.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. All those who agree, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
And number 3, Mr. Mayor, I move to amend Brian Holman's renewal of employment agreement by A, increasing the number of months of severance pay to 12 months, B, amending the definition of termination to include the failure of the council to reappoint him as municipal judge unless such failure is because of conviction for any offense involving moral turpitude or illegal acts involving personal gain to him or indictment for a felony offense, and C, waiving 100% of the employee costs of retiree health insurance until such time as he reaches the age of 65 and is eligible for Medicare.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
My turn.
Councilmember Green?
Okay. I move that increases in compensation for the following persons are adopted for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2022. City Secretary Julie Wooster, total compensation increase 6%. City Attorney Elizabeth Plaster, total compensation increase 6%. Chief Municipal Court Judge Brian Holman, total compensation increase 6%. Alternate Municipal Court Judges, total compensation increase 0%.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you are in agreement, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being no further business to attend to on the agenda, we are adjourned. And it is 9:54.
The old days of
Never been longer.
race to say